All right, we are on the air. It's the September 3rd, 2024 work session, and we begin with an update on the council goal of parks. Update and discussion on that.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Emma Sagor, City Manager. I'm going to give a brief update on what has happened since the last goal update I provided on parks back in the early summer, and then try to save quite a bit of time for discussion from you all on work you might like to see next out of staff or out of yourselves related to the parks goal. Several of these slides are actually borrowed from that early June presentation, the last time I gave an update, but I just want to kind of again set the scene, provide the context of the updates I'm going to provide tonight. There's a few elements to our parks goal I'm going to be talking about tonight. The first is just a quick update on the validation action. As a reminder, this is a petition that we filed with the courts back in July of 2022 to clarify the terms under which the city could leave the Parks District. This arose after some disagreement with the county over the terms in our IGA that was adopted in 1990. So we filed the validation petition to understand if the terms that are in the existing IGA are accurate. In May of 23, the Circuit Court ruled that Milwaukie must follow the process outlined in ORS 198 to leave the district. That's different than what it says in the IGA. We appealed that decision, and we are still awaiting the result of that appeal. The Court of Appeals is a slow and backed up place, so we really, it's out of our hands at this point. We have to wait for it to run its course. There's a few conversations, and I'll talk a little bit more about these later, but where we attempted to re-engage in some conversations while we are awaiting the result of the appeal. In 2023, that happened in September, and then we were asked to put a pause on future discussions between us and the NCPRD Board of Directors until the litigation is resolved. And again, I'll share more about an update of some more recent communications.
A quick question
Absolutely.
for Justin.
Yep.
I thought I remember you saying that you were expecting a date for oral arguments. Is that what I remember?
That's what we're currently awaiting, and we won't probably get that for a month or maybe 2 months from now.
But as I remember, it was not like this infinity sign. It was something at least in the foreseeable future.
In a month or 2 months, we should hear
Okay.
from the court, and we have no tools to make the court.
Yeah, I think
faster. Yeah.
it was just kind of beyond the horizon before. So
Yeah.
Okay.
The last I heard from our attorneys was a month to 2 months, and
Thank
that
you.
was from the Court of Appeals clerk.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. So the second piece of an update, really where I'll spend the bulk of my time today, is talking about Milwaukie Bay Park. Again, just a kind of ground setting of where we are with that project. This is for phase 3 of Milwaukie Bay Park. The previous 2 phases have been completed. 50% construction designs have been done since 2021. At that point, we engaged in some negotiations with the county to develop some IGAs, intergovernmental agreements, to ensure the project could move forward. And it's kind of, I think I called it last time, IGA soup. There's a lot of IGAs that get thrown around in this context. So we call them the funding IGA, the construction IGA, and then either the master cooperative, or sometimes the term maintenance has gotten thrown in their IGA. The funding and construction IGAs are specific to Milwaukie Bay Park. Those came out of negotiations between the city and the county to really talk about how the park was going to be paid for and how it was going to be built. The city council adopted both of those in November of 2021, but they had sunset clauses, so they've now both those IGAs have sunset.
Can I ask a question about this? Upon sunset of the IGA, do they go into a year-to-year, or are we just out of agreement entirely?
That's a good question. I think on the funding and construction ones, they were, because they were about that specific project, I believe those concluded. But I'm looking to city attorney.
I believe we wrote a sunset clause into the funding IGA to sunset if the county didn't take an action by a certain date. So that was the funding one. The construction one, I don't recall, and I don't think there is an end date to the cooperative IGA, the master IGA.
Yeah.
I think that's just, we've amended and added addendums to that over the course of its existence. The call now is to craft a brand-new IGA to cement our relationship.
Okay.
Mhm.
So it's likely that then the funding and the construction have no standing.
That is my understanding.
Thank you.
The county commission, back in 2022, pulled the consideration of the funding IGA a couple times from agendas. They did in March approve it, but with an added stipulation that funds could not be spent until an updated master IGA was agreed to. The city was provided a draft of that updated master IGA, again, back in 2022. That draft removed language relating to how the city could leave the district, which is what set in motion the validation petition actions from the previous slide.
Emma, was there any conversation with the county prior to removing that language, or was it a surprise that that was presented to us?
I was not here at that time, so Justin.
You maybe just need to.
Yeah. I never participated in any discussions about a new cooperative IGA. Certainly, I'm told that staff had talked about that, but that the work on the funding and construction IGAs was purposefully kept separate from those conversations. I never engaged with county council or anybody else on any terms related to a cooperative IGA. I received a draft cooperative IGA on the morning of the meeting when we first addressed publicly our dissatisfaction with NCPRD. And at that meeting, council gave direction to staff to start investigating the cooperative IGA that was in place and steps that we could take to get out of the district. At that time, I didn't have direction to engage in negotiating a new cooperative IGA. I told county council that. I reviewed it briefly, and no other correspondence has taken place since that day.
Okay. It's just usually with an IGA between two jurisdictions, there's some conversation that happens in advance that would highlight an interest in amending an IGA before you would receive a document that has draft language included in it. It seems very abrupt that would have been received without any previous context provided by the county.
That's my experience as well, which was almost humorous that we received that on the eve of our first public meeting. I do believe staff had indicated that there had been some discussions that this is something off in the future that we need to take place because the existing IGA, the 2008 IGA, there's some parks that we currently have online that aren't addressed in there. There's some maintenance obligations and things of that nature. That the idea was at some time in the future, we would renegotiate a new cooperative IGA. Those discussions never took place between the county council's office or mine, despite I've seen some references otherwise.
And the amendment to the master IGA that was presented to council did not touch on those maintenance questions. It just focused on the provision for Milwaukie to leave, or was it more
I
comprehensive? It
believe
covered all of
the
it?
draft
It was-
provided to you was a fully new.
It was a brand new IGA, although it was very short, and I would not, it's been several years since I've looked at it. It did not have any provision about termination or the city being able to leave the district.
Okay.
However, based on my experience with the council, or with the county council, they've been switching their IGAs to a new template.
Okay.
As we've renewed IGAs. This IGA that I received was based on that new template. So it had a lot of cookie cutter language in it, but the details certainly had not been discussed about the new parks. That none of the exhibits were there. It was just a starting salvo to start negotiations. And I didn't have direction, nor have I received direction to this point to engage in those discussions.
Can I ask a question of the mayor? If you're around here, I say that the section of the master IGA that removed the language for leaving the district was a surprise.
It was a surprise to me. I guess I will say that the mayor at the time, Mayor Gamba, and Paul Savas had been having conversations. I don't know if Mayor Gamba would say it was a surprise to him. It was a surprise to me when Justin brought that to us. Not a huge surprise, but it was a surprise.
If I could add, I had a conversation with the mayor that morning and told him that, and he laughed. So, I don't know whether or not that weighs in favor of surprise or not.
I'm not sure how extensive a trip in the Wayback Machine this would involve, but I think for our legislative awareness, it would be really helpful to see how that IGA was delivered. Like if we could read the email that came with it, that there are, if it said something like, as per our conversations here,
I can forward it to you in 30 seconds.
yeah, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. And so what's not kind of summarized here, but when we received that draft, I believe what happened was the city followed up with the NCPRD director to say, hey, our understanding per the language in the current IGA is we can leave pursuant to ORS 222. Is that the NCPRD's understanding? The response back was no, we believe it's through ORS 198. That then triggered we agreed to do some mediation. Through mediation, we were not able to come to an agreement. And that's what sparked then the validation action. And Justin, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I think you've said to me a few times, that was an important step for us because before negotiating a new agreement, it's important to understand the terms of the existing agreement that we have.
Yeah, I mean, that's been kind of the line the whole time and we differed. In fact, prior to mediating, our IGA has a mediation requirement. So in order we had a disagreement about what that term meant. And so we were required to ask them, hey, this is what we think it means. Do you think otherwise? And they responded, no, we think otherwise. And so that's what spun us into mediation.
I mean, I think that process must have been very confusing because you have two ORS, statutes that pertain to special districts. One pertains to a parks district and one does not. And what they were saying is that we were held to held to the guidelines of the one that did not pertain to a parks district, or how do you see the difference between these two statutes?
I think the sole basis for the county not agreeing with us on our pathway to get out of the district is based on the Happy Valley case. And it's the position they've taken in the appeal, that the Happy Valley case determined as a matter of law that a city who wants to leave a county special district needs to leave by virtue of ORS 198.
I see.
So that's the entire basis of our appeal.
Even though the process of Happy Valley entering into the district was very different than ours.
But you did strike on the fact that it's been my understanding, this district was formed under an ORS section that is not normally the one used for parks, correct?
I can't say that historically, I mean, there is such a thing as a county service district for parks and recreation services. That does exist. NCPRD is the only ORS 451 county service district for parks and recreation in the state of Oregon. I don't know historically if that was a more frequently used district, but they exist now as the only one.
Yeah, I've never seen any kind of explanation of why that was, why it was established under that section at the time. I've never seen any back history of that.
And then just pulled up the IGA, the master IGA. The language there says the city may choose at any time to withdraw entirely from the district pursuant to ORS 222.524. So when we're, the validation action is just to understand, to validate if that is still an accurate
And
statement.
that language was contained in the cooperative IGA since its formation in 1990.
Yes.
And both jurisdictions signed the IGA and amendments multiple amendments to this IGA stating a different ORS than what the county is purporting now.
Well, I would like to add a caveat to that. The original IGA didn't contain this exact language. It contained language of a more general nature that the city, at any time, if it's choosing, may leave the district pursuant to regulations of the Boundaries Commission and some, I'm not quoting it perfectly. In 2008, the pencil was sharpened on that to actually add a statutory reference.
Was there a contextual reason for that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I believe that
New
was,
attorney or
that,
new
yeah.
something?
I think that was probably a recognition that back in 1990, the understanding that the city held by entering into the district or into the creation of the district was that we'd be able to leave at any time. And the ORS 221 process allows us to do that, whereas the 198 process doesn't allow us to do
But
that.
I think Rebecca's point, is that they had a long time to change this, and they didn't. And they didn't.
You're smelling what I'm stepping in.
Oh, yeah.
They had a long-
I've been there.
The one intervening event is, of course, the Happy Valley case. And currently their position in the appeal is that Happy Valley decision governs our exit from
They
the
had plenty of time since Happy Valley too.
And also the only similarity there is that they are also an incorporated city. But there's no similarity in terms of how each of those cities entered into the district.
Or the time frame, or, yeah.
To your point, the Happy Valley IGA between Happy Valley and North NCPRD did not have any reference to the city being able to pull out at any time, or is that true?
I don't know the answer to that.
What's the question? Could you repeat, please?
We're like alluding to the Happy Valley IGA being different than the Milwaukie IGA.
Happy Valley doesn't have an IGA.
Or at the time when they were in the district, they didn't have an
Well,
IGA.
they annexed into the district, so they have an annexation agreement that
Okay.
governs their existence in the district.
Uh-huh.
We were present at district formation and we joined with the county in forming the district. So our involvement didn't come via annexation into a district. It
Yeah.
involved the creation of the district. And what governs our relationship with NCPRD is an intergovernmental agreement.
Uh-huh.
I can't say for certain that Happy Valley doesn't have other side intergovernmental agreements, but generally they made a decision as a council to annex into the
Yeah.
district.
But governing parks, they never signed an IGA that gave them the ability to leave in the same way that Milwaukie has. Okay.
And I'm led to believe that at the time, Happy Valley was dissatisfied with their service from NCPRD and were told from the county that they should leave the district via 222. And so Happy Valley voted as a council to do such. They actually went on the ballot, in the subsequent ballot, I believe. I might have my timing out, but to float money, a tax to run their own district. And then when that paperwork got filed with the state, the taxing authority, who is, if I might be using the wrong terminology, but they're charged with changing the tax maps to say who's going to collect what. They came forth and said, we can't approve this because the district needed, or Happy Valley needed to exit via 198 rather than 222.
Okay.
Because they were annexed.
And there were several lawsuits that Happy Valley filed against the county as a result of that.
And did you, remind me again, did you say that they didn't give a reason why they didn't let us out on 222? Or they gave a reason as to why they're denying us that route?
I
Like,
don't
why
know
are
if
they,
I understand the
why are
question.
they saying we have to get out in 198 and not with 222?
They're relying on the Happy Valley case as saying that's how we believe it is.
Other than that, there's no other. Just,
I believe in mediation, there were some statements that they were fearful of precedential value being set by allowing us to leave a district through that manner. But when we asked what other districts fit into this particular setup, we never received a response to that.
And just a factual clarification from the brilliant Peter Passarelli. So the funding IGA was actually adopted by the city in November of 2020. In 2021, the council passed the construction IGA and then also added the sunset clause for the funding IGA. So that's just a typo on my part. Apologies. Thanks. Eagle-eyed Passarelli.
I'm
Nice
for,
work.
Okay. The next two slides, again, are repeats from our June conversation. I'm sorry, it's kind of small there, but I just wanted to provide the funding breakdown for Milwaukie Bay Park and talk a little bit about some updates here. So the color coding for you, the blue, the kind of teal things are things that exist in NCPRD's budget. Purple exists in the city's budget, and then the gray ones are either Metro local share dollars from either agency or external funds from the Parks Foundation. You've heard a lot of talk about grant funding for these projects. There've been a lot of grant funding secured by NCPRD to support it. The last time I was here, I talked about concerns that those grants were coming up on some really imminent deadlines. And I really appreciate the work of Director Chiaselli at NCPRD and her staff who are trying to get us more time on these grants, and they've been pretty successful. They have heard from the state and from Metro that they will extend the timeline with no additional paperwork needed, and the feds are open to considering an extension. But an application will need to be put in this fall, so Kia and her team are working on that. And that extension will still require the project be complete by fall of 2026, which really means it needs to start. We need to restart the project by spring of 25 to make those deadlines. The other kind of piece I just want to note here is that we do have urban renewal money in the city's current budget. It's earmarked for Trolley Trail and Dogwood Park, but when we think about URA dollars that could be used for Milwaukie Bay Park, that's where that 1 million mark is coming from. We did remove a general fund allocation because our general fund is incredibly tight, and not knowing what the future held on this project, we needed to allocate those dollars elsewhere. So in our currently adopted budget, there is $0 of general fund money for Milwaukie Bay Park.
And is the 750 of Metro local share all that we have left of Metro local share?
Good question.
Do we?
Approximately.
Okay.
And will you remind us what the previous amount of general fund in that line item was?
I believe it was $250,000.
Thank you.
That was my recollection as well.
So this is just kind of what's happened since I talked to you in June. So you directed me and staff to attempt to engage NCPRD staff and see from a staff to staff level if we could start making some progress on Milwaukie Bay Park. And we sent an email the next day. There was a vacation within there, but really the next communication we got back was from Commissioner Paul Savis on July 18th, requesting, and this was directed, I believe, to the mayor, might have been the mayor and all of council, requesting that the conversation be elevated back to the elected level. I do want to say again, I really appreciate the collaboration between Director Selly, but it's, I think the wish of the county commission that this happen at the elected level. Mayor Beatty asked at that point if the commission would be open then to having 2-on-2 conversations about the park. And Commissioner Savas clarified that the resuming conversations would not occur unless or until the appeal on the validation petition is resolved or dropped. So there's been no further communication on the park since then. In August, we've seen kind of an uptick in constituent activity around Milwaukie Bay Park. We've been copied, we meaning staff and or council has been copied on several emails and correspondence to the county commission urging progress on the park. There's sort of a standard response that we've seen go back to those folks. It describes the project being on pause because there hasn't been progress on updating the cooperative or the master IGA. And then, sorry, it's a lot of words, but I wanted to put the quote in here from the email that says really the district needs assurances that should Milwaukie depart the district, that their investments are not removed from district ownership at the expense of district taxpayers. And that as this is a legal matter, further conversations are most appropriate between our attorneys and at the elected official level. And I just wanted to call this out, and it's in your staff report as well, but from city staff's perspective, we do not feel that there is an imminent departure of Milwaukie from the district. That's not direction we've been provided from this council. And our interpretation is that the legal matter does not involve Milwaukie Bay Park. Milwaukie Bay Park is not mentioned in the validation action petition, and therefore, we don't believe there's anything to preclude district residents from communicating with district leadership about the park. That's our interpretation. So that is really all I have for you today in way of an update. I wanted to give some time to, you know, as we've done, discuss some of the facts, answer any questions you may have, but also really hear what steps you'd like to see either staff take or staff support you in taking. You know, this is a council goal and will be until or maybe after we set new goals. And I just want to make sure we're utilizing our time and our resources in service of where you'd like us to go on this.
So I would just like to add a couple things. One is I want to give a shout out to Allie Feuerstein, the head of our Parks and Recreation Board, because she is really the person in the early months of this year who started flagging the expiring grants and really, you know, brought my attention and I think brought a lot of people's attention to that and led to, you know, some of the article that I had in this August pilot and some of the work the Milwaukie Parks Foundation and others have to try and get some letter writing to the county commission. So I just want to recognize Allie for being a real motivator on that. I do think, you know, we get copied on some letters, but I didn't, in the thing I wrote in the pilot, ask people to copy us. So I don't think we know how many letters the county commission has gotten, because I don't think we're getting copied on all of them, but we are getting copied on some. And I think I have really loved the letters people have written. They have really been heartfelt letters telling their personal family stories or why the park's important to them. They haven't at all been cookie cutter, you know, cut and paste some talking points into the letter. They've all been very personal letters, and I found them very moving. I'm hoping that they're having some impact on the county commissioners, but I guess if no one else is chomping at the bit to say anything, I will add that I have heard rumor that some people are trying to organize to be in Milwaukie Bay Park on Friday during First Friday. And if that does come to pass, I intend to be there to help, you know, spread the call for finishing Milwaukie Bay Park. The Milwaukie Parks Foundation had a campaign called Bring Play to Milwaukie Bay and raised $60,000 in the 2020 to 2022 timeframe, and you know, has put all that on hold. I mean, it's safely put into a high yield savings account, but you know, I know there are lots of people who are interested in helping try to move the conversation forward to get the park built before the grants expire.
And this is just something to think about. And I brought this up to you, Mayor, at the block party. And seeing how this affects the overall parks goal, but maybe we consider Milwaukie Bay Park as a goal, getting that completed. Whether it's, you know, because right now parks as a goal is more of a legal matter. It might behoove us to see what it looks like if we were to switch gears and focus solely on Milwaukie Bay Park and getting that completed. And what does that do? Because it's in the court's hands right now. So I don't really know how much there is for us to do, but I think it might be worth it to consider.
Well, I mean, our goal setting is in January.
No,
By
I'm saying
January,
just a planting the seed.
either, yeah, and I think it should be on the table for sure. But by January, we will, you know, if we haven't made progress on Milwaukie Bay Park by January, we probably will be looking at the loss of the grants, right?
And just to clarify, Great point, and I think a really interesting seed to plant. I do want to clarify again that the legal action right now has, in our minds, nothing to do with Milwaukie Bay Park, and can be, we believe progress can be made on the park while we await the outcome of that appeal. That's
And you're right, it might make sense to pivot because the Court of Appeals, by January, we will hopefully know when we're having our argument in the Court of Appeals, we'll hopefully, but even once we have the argument, there's no control over how long it takes the Court of Appeals to decide. So,
Well, I like the idea of adding some specificity to our goals because, there were many newer members of council when we set parks as a goal, and it was very helpful to have the momentum to be able to get up to speed on a lot of this legislative history. I have a couple questions that might mean more steps for Justin. We have the cooperative IGA, it has a continuation, it's, maybe it hasn't been renegotiated, but isn't it still it just continues year to year with what's currently in that document, right? So that covers our relationship with North Clackamas. That includes things like maintenance. That includes things like, really any partnership that we have with the district. And we're still putting money into the district, right? So, if we were taking a similar stance and allowing a validation action, which is not taking the county to court. A validation action is asking for clarification. And that's completely in our right to do. So I don't like the insinuation that this is us, dragging the county into the courtroom. And, this is really just getting clarification on a very confusing portion of a document versus a legislative, action that happened with.
and on an agreement that we had for 30 years.
Right.
It's only because they won't recognize the 30 years worth of agreement that we're doing a validation action.
Well, and the proposal from the county had modified language to the IGA, which ran counter to what our previous interpretation of that document had been. And clarification was really, us versus the county in terms of interpretation. Along with that mediation clause, it seems like this is the next logical step to get validation on, how we proceed. But that being said, if we were having the opinion of this being, a legal pause and we're not going to be, continuing any business or conversations about parks, then we probably wouldn't be continuing to put money into the district. We probably wouldn't be continuing to participate as an equal active partner. We wouldn't be building out, more parks with the intention of hopefully augmenting the assets that are available to all of the residents in the district. Because if Milwaukie Bay Park, when Milwaukie Bay Park finally gets developed, that is not a park that will be exclusive to Milwaukie residents. That's a park that is a regional asset to everyone in Clackamas County, in the metro area, visitors. That I don't understand the insinuation that that there's such an adversarial relationship here, and I'm worried that, what's happening is things are being lumped all together. Instead of being able to say, we still have an IGA. We're getting clarification on an element of that IGA. However, the other items under the IGA should be able to proceed as planned.
And
Right.
Counselor, I would also add that in the construction IGA that we approved in 2021, there was language speaking exactly to this risk of a stranded asset and talked about should a party terminate the agreement, and after termination, the city assumes operation and maintenance of the park and does not operate Milwaukie Bay Park with access for all NCPRD residents on the same terms, then the city shall pay prorated development cost NCPRD and return funds to any entity granting funds for the project. So basically, we're saying we're guaranteeing this is going to be a regional asset.
Put it in
Right.
writing.
Yeah, sucks that sunsetted, right? I would be open to renegotiating that. Like, let's keep the construction and the financing IGAs open and let's move forward and develop this because everybody's going to use it. And risk of a stranded asset, I mean, I would love to know how much money we've put into the district since filing the original validation action. If that's the moment that Clackamas County feels was like the non-starter for conversations about the district, we've continued to contribute assets. We've done that in good faith because we are part of the district. And I believe, I mean, I can speak for myself, but I hope that I speak for a majority of us, that we want to see some positive result come out of this because our residents across the whole region deserve it.
See how it's affecting everyone, just
Yeah.
letters, right?
Right.
So, yeah,
It shouldn't be this hard to figure out.
no, and especially the separating the two, like this isn't,
Jessica, I like everything you said. I'm trying to figure out exactly what you said. And you keep referring to this money that we've been putting in, and we need to reconsider it?
I don't think that we need to reconsider it.
What then?
I'm saying that for the county to say that they can't put more money in because they're risking stranding those assets if we pull out, is saying that they don't want to proceed with our relationship because they have a fear of that relationship being broken. But we are contributing. We are putting money in. We are helping to support the work of the district. And we're doing that in good faith. So I guess I'm saying that, part of the logic is flawed. That's what I'm trying to say. Does that help?
Got it.
Well, and it'll be interesting to see if that comes up. I believe that county commissioners are supposed to have a conversation this month about the next phase of the system plan work. And Commissioner Savas had previously expressed concerns about doing the systems plan work when it was unclear if Milwaukie was staying or going. And the point that was made by some DAC members who live outside Milwaukie is Milwaukie ratepayers are still paying the district.
Yes.
Milwaukie is still a part of the district. Their ratepayers are still part of our tax base. We shouldn't be treating them
Right.
any differently.
And just because we asked for clarification
Yeah.
on something doesn't mean that automatically our relation turns into pay to play.
I will say, I'm a little confused in Commissioner Savas' communications. Is it the validation action that's the problem? Is it the master IGA that's the problem? Is it a combination of both? In terms of the validation action, I think it is important that we have clarity on what our existing IGA says. But if it is the master IGA and concerns that there's some imminent removal of us from the district, like, I don't think that that's founded. And I think this may be me going out on a limb, but I would be open to the idea of entering into a new master IGA that includes the maintenance for new parks that we're building, that also says something along the lines of, we will not leave the district bounded in some time. So we won't leave the district until 2028 or some date to be determined. Hopefully allay some of these concerns and get construction on Milwaukie Bay Park started. I say that because if the concern really is that we're gonna leave the district the second that the funding and construction IGAs are approved, I don't think that that's valid, and I don't think that's the intent whatsoever. And I think making that clear in a new master IGA, maybe, and this is, I guess, the problem. I'm unclear of what Commissioner Savas, where the bar is, but if that would meet the bar and that would allow construction on Milwaukie Bay Park, I think that that's something that I would be interested in.
Then why don't we just work on renegotiating the two IGAs that are specific to Milwaukie Bay Park, the finance and the construction? Because it seemed like there was language in those documents that would provide assurances.
I
Yeah,
think,
that would be much easier, that would be much more easily done. I would say renegotiating the master IGA is a huge project, because, not just because of the departure clause because of all the things that have happened over the three new parks to
Yeah.
maintain. And, I think it's a big lift to do that. And it doesn't make a lot of sense, as was referenced by our attorney, to do that when we don't even know what the clause in our existing master IGA means. But if we can put the two Milwaukie Bay Park specific IGAs back on the table for fine tuning.
Yeah.
And I think back in 2021 or 2022, the message from the county commission was they approved the funding IGA contingent on a renegotiation of the master IGA. So I think what you would be asking, if you want to go out again and say, hey, can we come to the table and work on these two, is just knowing that that would be a departure from kind of what their position was in 2022, to move those forward and not do it contingent on a master IGA.
Just gotta do it ourselves.
It's a little,
Just gotta do it ourselves.
Develop Milwaukie Bay Park ourselves? Well, that would be, I mean, the percentage of funding that we have available or that we have the control to divert to that project is far less than the estimates for construction, which are already under standard.
Yeah, I know. That's why it would have to be a goal to figure that out, how we do that.
And if we have to start construction or finalize this by spring of 2025, like, I guess to Councilor Stavendor's point, I don't see a way that we on our own could get the funding aligned ahead of 25, or maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't, that's a different time. I mean, unless these extensions go through. And how long are those extensions would be good for?
I believe the understanding of the extensions is we'd have to restart the project by next spring, and then the project would have to be complete by 2026. The grants are all held by NCPRD as well. They're not held by the city of Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Right. But we were talking about there was some language in some of these emails, or not emails, but we've talked about transferring those grants at one point too, right? The possibility of that. I mean, there's a potential of losing the grants either way, isn't there? One way or the other.
Well, I will say
And even if these extensions come through, I think the timeline on obligating them, completing things,
it's difficult.
and I will tell you, if I was granting grants and some entity came to me and said, well, we didn't use the money, we didn't finish anything, and they come back and say, we gave you an extension and we didn't do anything either, I just don't think they're gonna be real receptive, if we go to the table 3 times.
Right. And so my point is that either way, you'll lose the grants. Because
Either way?
because the only other way to do it is if they start. Either they start, right, or we do.
Right, well, and I think there's a couple
They're
of
not
things there,
gonna
right?
start.
We could ask them to start. I mean, we have been.
We have been, that's what I'm saying, like, it's
But
not working.
I mean, we could put on the table that we're willing to revisit these two IGAs. We're willing to provide them the assurances that, that non-residents will never be treated differently than Milwaukie residents. I just don't even know how that would be physically possible anyway.
It's just a tactic.
It's a political theater, like someone called it. So that's one option, trying to get them to start, renegotiate those assurances. The other option is to try and get them to give us the funding that they had committed, to give their $3 million of Metro green space allocation, which they can't spend everywhere. That's not money that you can spend on everything, and I don't know all the rules about what you can spend it on, but there was some reason they couldn't spend all that on Concord, or they would have.
Right.
So
But either way, it doesn't change the
let us
timeline.
use our SDCs, give us back the SDCs that have been collected in Milwaukie. Make the $3 million Metro allocation, give us the plans, and let us build the park.
But that doesn't, what I'm saying is that none of those options change the timeline of spring or
It's still-
2026.
they don't.
So that's what I'm saying. So either way, there's a
It's
chance we
tough.
could lose the grant, right? So I think what we need to do is if we're gonna, I think we have to actually just come to the realization that there's a chance we'll lose the grant, not even include those. So let's say the grants weren't even there. What's the next step forward? Do we still want to try to ask them to build it like we've been doing for 15 years? Or do we want to take this on ourselves as a council goal, potentially later discussion? Because I get why we're concerned about the grants, but it doesn't sound like anything we do is going to change that timeline. Nothing's going to change that timeline. So we can kind of throw those grants out the window for the most part, because I highly doubt they're going to move on it. And I highly doubt they're going to give us the money. So
Well, I'm not willing to give those options up.
I'm not saying give them up. I'm not saying give them up, but what I'm saying is we should think beyond those two options, right? Because at some point it's going to come to, that timeline's not changing. And both of those options are up to them, the same people who have said, screw you for 15 years. So the likelihood, I'm just looking at I'm doing our numbers to the probability, right? Of them saying no is pretty high. So if we know that that probability is pretty high, what would be the next step following that, right? Forest through the trees type of thing. We already know who we're dealing with. We know what that entity is about. We know what they're most likely going to say. So at that point, what's the next step? Because if we're going to lose these grants, does the project go out the window? We're still going to work on it, right? So maybe it's something that we take on ourselves.
Just want to do a time check. We're about 5 minutes over for this item, so I need some last words and then we'll move to our next item.
Well, this is going to be a very interesting conversation and a lot of what ifs. But from my perspective, we just have to wait for a decision on validation action. And I don't know what else we do in the meantime, except talk about things we might try. But until we get that answer, I'm not sure that it would be in our best interest to proceed along any of these routes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
If you thought there was a opening there to renegotiate or to put back on the table the construction and the,
Yeah, I will grant you that, okay? But I will tell you that I don't think that's gonna happen.
okay, well, fair enough.
Okay.
But I mean, you're not
I'm-
saying
I'm
it's
open.
not worth trying.
I'm open, but I just don't think it's gonna happen.
As
We're just gonna do the same formula.
Emma, I think it's worth moving through these conversations, assuming that we are going to be collaborative jurisdictions that want the best for our residents. That has to be the expectation that we bring the county back. You know, anytime this starts to feel very personal or very, very subjective, we have an IGA that is, questionably out of date. There hasn't been any movement to re-up that. In the process, we have 2 other IGAs that are specific to Milwaukie Bay Park that have sunsetted. And that puts our jurisdiction and the county in a bad light because residents want to see, they're excited. You get to 50% design on something. People want you to be moving forward. That's a big accomplishment. And I can't imagine that the county board feels good about that either. So I think it might be worth reaching out to the county and discussing the idea of, let's handle the path for the validation action and the clarification on one hand. Like if they feel like they can't talk to us about that, that's fine. Let's wait. That's fine. But the other thing is that we're in the district currently. We are a part of the district. We should be able to talk about the other areas of the, business that pertain to that. So if they refuse to talk with us about things that fall under the IGA now, then I would like to have some more clarification from their legal counsel as to the legal precedent for them not to talk to us about an active agreement that we have in place. We're all part of this district. They've been there and they're not wanting to move forward that conversation because of a request for clarification on something that's completely different. So it would be helpful to understand in more depth from the county attorney exactly why.
And can I clarify? Thanks, Councilor Savio, that's very clear. Given the request from the county side to elevate this back to the elected level? Would that be a request or a sort of overture one of you would like to make, or would you like me to try to do it from the staff level?
No, that's a good clarification. I think that it's appropriate for that to go from elected to elected, but I would like to have legal representation copied on the email from both sides. Are you open to that, Mayor?
Sure, I'm open to anything that'll get the conversation going.
Okay. So, and just to confirm, it would be to express interest in coming back to the table to talk about the construction and funding IGAs and potentially other elements in our existing IGA that do not touch the validation action. And if legal counsel on the county side says that's not an appropriate communication, more understanding of why.
Then I would like to see the legal justification for why
I was
they
gonna say,
can't
we can
engage
pull
with
their
us.
quote from from the letters they've been sending people about why you've got it there. As this is a legal matter for the conversation, I mean, that's like,
Well,
What
it
legal matter?
says further conversations are most appropriate between attorneys and the elected official level. So let's do it.
okay.
So I'm hearing that'll be the next step is a communication will it be sent by the collective body, or are we gonna ask one
Are we
member?
gonna go back to 2-on-2 kind of approach, or? what do you
Yeah,
think?
we've identified 2 liaisons from our council. Are you 2 okay with that?
Yeah.
I would be fine with that, and I'm loving the work session conversations that we've been having, and I'm sure the public appreciate it.
Yeah.
So then we can bring it back, maybe?
Sure. Now I want to confirm the liaisons that we had last fall, where I believe, remind me who those were. These 2. Okay,
Oh,
great.
wait.
I thought you were,
I participated with the mayor in a conversation with the county chair
okay,
and Commissioner Schall.
okay,
And after that point,
great,
the county clarified that they would like Commissioner Savas to be the primary
great.
liaison on this issue. And then we had a conversation.
Okay,
About
we've identified the council
formalizing.
president and the mayor as our parks lane leaders. So swim they will. Okay,
Okay.
thank you very much, I appreciate it.
But did we answer the question about a letter from the mayor or the collective?
I think it was a letter from the 2 of you,
2 of us.
council president and mayor.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone. Oh,
So,
okay.
Need to
it's
like
coffee.
Yeah.
shake the
Okay,
hand.
take your time setting up. Hurry. Take your time setting
It's
up.
actually just,
We will, oh,
I grabbed the wrong one, sorry. Gave me a microphone. All right,
Can you beatbox?
I was at one time in a different life. That's the E squared MC joke.
Oh,
Goes
nice.
Stefan,
15,
are you
20 years.
joining us?
I could.
They have
love
your
to have
name
you
up
here.
there.
Yay!
Gabriella, it's like, oh, are you supposed to be part of this too? No.
Well, he did review the staff report, so.
It's all over.
All right,
Hi.
just for the viewers on air, we're having a very short break. We will resume momentarily.
Councilor Anderson, are you excited to learn about the Milwaukie Leadership Academy? I know it's.
I've heard about it once or twice.
Yeah.
Great.
Is this Untitled Goose Game or?
That is Untitled Goose
Okay.
Game, yeah, Peace was never an option.
Okay, yeah.
No, a firm but welcoming presence, I think, what could be more Milwaukie than that.
Yeah. It really brings that attitude.
I'll tell you what, in some of the original drafts, Millie absolutely did. Goose for
I like it.
You just put some Velcro, and then swap out the props.
Yeah, running around, feeling careful though, because if Emma hears that, then I'm gonna actually need to, oh, hey, boss, how you doing?
right, come on, Counselor.
Other things happening Friday evening. Steph and his band are playing at.
Oh,
sure.
Okay, we're back now, so you guys can start. Welcome Dan Harris and Stephen Lashbrook to talk to us about the Milwaukie Leadership Academy.
Thank you very much, Mayor Beatty, President Massey, Council, City Manager. Hi. Yeah, we are here to talk once again about the Milwaukie Leadership Academy. So as I think Council is aware, the Milwaukie Leadership Academy has been in operation since 2019. It is an opportunity for members of our community. And when we talk about our community, we don't just mean city limits. This is for residents, close neighbors, business owners, folks who drive by on 99 and say, hey, what's going on over there? This is an opportunity for community members to come in and learn more about the city and about how the city government operates. And that name, Milwaukie Leadership Academy, we did have a little bit of feedback this last session that folks were confused. They thought they were coming to learn specifically like supervisory skills. And so that's maybe a conversation for the future about if we want to keep that name exactly the same. What it actually means is that it's an opportunity for people to hear from representatives of city leadership about how the city's operating. Like that, anything to that? Oh, no, just. So with that, we hosted a little bit of an abridged version of the course this year. Normally it runs from October through to the following June with a break in December, because good luck trying to coordinate any of that at the end of December, or even the beginning of December. But this year, due to some staff changes, we ran from January through to June. So we tightened up our offering a little bit. Our equity program was compressed as part of council goals. We didn't do a whole lot about our strategic engagement team. We hit on just core services and tried to provide good information and a good product. One of the goals of this program ultimately is to see more members of our community involved in city government. And I would say that we got one notable success this year. Councillor Anderson came out of this year's class. But beyond that, I mean, the message that we communicate again and again is that there are any number of ways to be an active and engaged resident. And that can be anything from an elected position to participating in a board or committee where we've had reasonably good success historically in folks coming out of the Leadership Academy and looking for more ways to get involved, at least applying whether they were selected or not, to being involved in your neighborhood district association, or indeed any kind of community volunteering work that can be done. We really try to get folks interested in it, to try to get them a better understanding of what that can look like and what their local government is doing. You jump in at any old time at all. You're doing fine. So with that, this year, like I said, we ran from January through to June. We had about 22 students start the class. We ended up with about 16 completing all or most of the sessions, which is a pretty standard rate of attrition for us. Folks get busy. Like I said, a handful were just in the wrong class. Just we're looking for something different than what this program actually is. The feedback that we got, I did not run a formal end of course survey this year, but the feedback that we got from class members was that generally they felt that their time was well used. They felt better informed about the nature of city government. They felt more ready to be involved. And I would say like one piece that I would absolutely point to as a success for this is that the city of Canby is now piloting a program modeled off of this one, because an employee of the city of Canby who lives in unincorporated Clackamas County took an interest in this and was so excited by it that he brought it back to his city and said, hey, why aren't we doing something like this? Hey, we should be doing something like this. And now they are. So I was able to meet with the facilitators of the Can Be class middle of last month and talk through some of the perils and pitfalls of establishing a leadership academy. That's last year. Do we have questions about that before we look out to the future? Comments about that?
Counselor Anderson, since you were a participant, do you want to make any
Sure.
particular observations or?
I would say like,
It's okay to say you hated it. You can
No.
say you hated it.
I was going to say the opposite. Like, to have an opportunity like that, to scaffold for someone who wants to get involved in the city but doesn't know how or doesn't know where, the like overview of all of the different things that the city is doing, the like expertise that you provide, stuff for you to just talk about like what a city has looked like since the 1800s, like it is incredibly helpful to just see the wealth of experience that you all bring to this and the welcoming atmosphere that you set up there too, Dan. I think like, if I think about, dare I speak about future Milwaukie Leadership Academy before we get there. I think one thing that I think a lot about is like, how do we measure, there's this idea that there are 200 residents who are hyper involved in Milwaukie. And I think a measure of success is how many of those people in the Milwaukie Leadership Academy go on to serve on a board or an NDA or serve on council or some other thing. I would be really interested in the follow through from Milwaukie Leadership Academy year over year since 2019. But then also to that end, if it is a really successful program, the diversity within the Milwaukie Leadership Academy, like how are we intentionally getting more young folks there or making sure that like it is taking us towards our equity goals? Because I think it's such a wonderful program. But I also saw like my fellow classmates were wealthy and white and far older than the average Milwaukie resident, which to be fair, who wants to give up their late nights to go to a program like that? You have to be pretty nerdy and have a lot of time on your hands. So
It is a real and an ongoing problem and something that we recognize. So a couple of years ago, we started providing the application in Spanish and English. We distributed it through Clackamas Community College. I did tabling at the Leading Library, at the Milwaukie Community Center, and I attempted to do tabling at the Wichita Center, but there was some concern that the presence of like an outsider, serving folks receiving aid might be stigmatizing.
yeah.
And so what we ended up doing was we put together a flyer, again in Spanish and English, that was distributed through the backpacks there. And I will tell you, the composition of that class, the demographic composition of that class that year was largely like the one this year. And so it's not to say that we've given up on that, but it is to say that we're running into a little bit of it's a hard row to hoe because, we want to let people know this is open to you. This is specifically to diversify and to make more accessible to demystify local government. One of the things that came out of the listening sessions in 2020 that I remember, I was taking notes on it at the time, and I think about this practically every time we put something out, is that there were residents who were people of color who said, I see these advertisements for my neighborhood district association, and it says everyone's welcome. And I know very well that doesn't mean me. And so we've done different things to try to make not only the academy, but also that process of getting involved with the neighborhood associations more welcoming. We tried where we had the reading groups a couple of years ago, and these were like discussion groups outside of class, extracurricular activities. And the idea being that people would be paired up with others in their neighborhood association and like, well, hey, if part of the reason that people go to an NDA and leave after, half the meeting or one meeting or whatever, and don't come back is, well, I didn't know anyone there. All right, well, look, we got you a buddy. We built in, now you know someone, now you can go with a classmate, with someone who you had some shared experience with, and maybe that'll help. And that didn't really go anywhere either. So definitely not something that we're giving up on, but it's an ongoing struggle, and it's a real one.
I want to point out that the ongoing struggle about how do you attract more people to take an interest in city government through this program, but is the same in my mind as the difficulty getting people to NDA meetings and getting them to come back after they've been to one, you know? And I don't know the answer, obviously, because our NDA has our little core group who shows up every month, you know, and they do the work, but it's time for some other people to step up.
I think it's not a Milwaukie leadership specific or a
Oh,
Milwaukie leadership
right.
academy thing or an NDA thing. It is like as a city, this is something that I think we really struggle with. And as we do our activity work going forward, thinking about how do we crack that nut, it's a tricky one.
But I do think this city is doing that better than so many others that I'm aware of. That's,
Dan?
could it be better? You bet.
Sorry, that's a good point though, yeah, because a lot of things better than a lot of.
Yeah.
See, is there childcare options for these meetings?
There is not childcare offered for these
That-
meetings,
that might
Counselor,
be
so I think that would be a thing. The problem that you run into there is that, particularly for people with younger children, and I can say this as a toddler parent, and I know you're familiar with where I'm coming from on this, is that, you know, pulling toddlers out of their routine from 5:45 to 8 p.m. it's just going to crater those evenings. So what we have done is that we've offered these classes originally as a pandemic necessity, and we've kept it going as just good practice. We offer most of these as hybrid classes so that people who do need to be at home can dip in, can listen in, can still ask questions, can still engage. I think that right now this program is funded largely out of just operating funds from the city manager's office. If there were to be a dedicated, daycare line item or a dedicated leadership academy funding stream, that's definitely something that, I would be open to exploring, and I know something that we've been successful in having at past community meetings and open houses. Right now, we keep the budget for meals very low, and our advertising is non-existent.
Right.
But it is, that would definitely, if we could say, hey, you have guaranteed childcare, and not only will you eat, but the kids will eat, I think people would come to that.
I also just want to share a quick story, but Dan tabled at and worked and produced and put on our winter solstice event.
Yeah.
You wear many hats tonight. But I remember one of the best conversations from that was a mom with a young daughter who I think was 9 years old or something, and was like, can I take this? Because she loved cities and she wanted to build buildings one day. And I don't think that they ever ended up signing up, but I loved that vision of like someone with kids interested in this. So both childcare to take them away, but also maybe having it be a very kid-friendly space. Yeah, it is.
Well, and I'll tell you, we do get that age question from time to time of like, well, what's the minimum age? And the answer is, well, there's not really one. We're not talking about anything that's, rude, crude, or socially unacceptable. We're talking about the mechanics of city government. So if there is someone who is, I would be surprised to find an especially engaged, younger teenager or tween. But if there's somebody, we've said before, hey, 15, 16 years old, there's a spot on the application for your guardian to sign off, for your legal guardians to sign off and give you permission to be here. And it's ostensibly a public meeting, so it's not as if we're throwing anyone out anyway, unless they're being disruptive, and that's something that's never come up.
I want to jump on this one in particular, and I think it was probably before Dan got involved with the program. We had 2 high school students and 1 middle school student enrolled. None of them finished. The middle school student dropped out well before the others. And we had a really hard time getting coordination with the schools to realize these kids ought to get some school credit for doing this. And there ought to be some opportunity for that to work. We got nothing. And you could blame a lot of that on the pandemic and everything else that was going on then, but that one really disappointed. I was hoping, because early on, those kids were engaged, they asked good questions, and I thought, oh, this is cool, this will be good.
Is there an opportunity to pick that back up?
Well, so I chased that, not at the middle school or high school level, but at the college credit level, because some of the thought at the time was, well, maybe we could make this into something that awards academic credit. And it's not going to be, nobody's getting their degree in Leadership Academy, right? But if we could get some electives or like maybe government or civics or something like that. And I chased that down with Clackamas Community College, and there would have been a requirement. It turns out, I mean, you know this because you were, I didn't know this. We're both qualified to be college professors.
I was an instructor for Clackamas Community.
Oh, there you go. That's what I'm saying. You knew that. I didn't though, and I learned that about myself. There would have been some like homework requirements and a final project requirement, and for it to be done at no cost to the students, it would have been about $1,500 a year from the city, and there was some like minor pro forma certification process that we would have had to go through. But I think the feeling was, hey, so there are 16 people a session, and of those, maybe 2 or 3 are going to want one elective credit. It might not be the best use of $1,500. But there again, you know, it's something that we could definitely come back to, could re-explore. And I mean, I'd definitely be open to having that conversation with NCSD and saying, hey, is there room for this?
Yeah.
I don't know, since we are looking at an application, we're looking at starting in next month, in late October. I don't know if we'll be able to get that done for this year. But if that's something that council would like to see, I'm happy to dig back in on that.
I feel like there might be an easier intermediate path, which is that all students have in-service days, and likely those are going to fall on a work day for city staff. So we wouldn't be necessarily asking, on right away to have city staff show up like late at night or on the weekend. But, to work with the high school to identify the civics and kind of government teacher, and then just figure out an in-service that teacher can start promoting to say, on this day, you're gonna get like a condensed version, a sampler of the Leadership Academy. And then it would just be, a kind of a speed dating version of the academy, so that then those students get, maybe it's extra credit at that point. Maybe it's not actually an academic credit or an elective credit, but something that allows them to just kind of dip their toe in the pool.
Yeah.
And then that gives us a relationship to build on for future years. Do you think you'd be
That's pretty
open
cool.
to thinking about that?
I mean, I'm definitely open to it, Counselor. What I would say is that we do, as a city, already host Bring Your Child to Work Days. So this is just sort of that, but in reverse. We could bring work to the children, right? I mean, I mean it though, we could, I think that we could probably come up with some kind of an abridged curriculum for that. We would need to make sure that we had buy-in from our departments, because ultimately, I mean, we're facilitating, and I give a little bit of instruction on just forms of government as part of the first class. But beyond that, I mean, we know more than one thing, but not more than 2 or 3 between us. So we sort of push. I speak only for myself. But I mean, we would need to get staff buy-in on it. But I think it's an interesting idea, and I think it's something that could be accomplished. It would strengthen that relationship for certain.
It's a really good idea, actually, because I remember in school, you can get 10% boosted on your grade towards the end of the semester if you attended this rally or went to this store, or it's got this, a proof that you went to this shop or whatever it was. I would always, try to take advantage of those, but yeah, that's probably, you can circumvent.
And for many families, I mean, it depends on the age of the young person, but for many families, they don't have out-of-school supports during in-service days. So it might actually be helpful in that regard too, to give the youth, something constructive to be a part of while parents are working.
I do want to be respectful of time.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, this is a great conversation and a good segue to the next one, but I think we still need to talk about the future of MLA, and we're a little bit over time, so I'm
So
gonna
just-
move us there.
Very quickly, recruitment is open right now. So anybody who is interested, who sees this or who hears about this or who would like to talk to their friends about the Milwaukie Leadership Academy, now is a great time to register. We used to say apply, that scared some folks away. I've never, not one time in my 5 years of doing this, 4 years of doing this, turned somebody away from it. So if you're interested in registering, milwaukieoregon.gov/leadership academy, or my contact information is there on the screen. Anybody who reaches out to me, I'd be more than happy to point in the right direction on this. Classes are generally going to be held from 5:45 p.m. till 8 p.m. the last Wednesday of the month. Some of those are second to last Wednesday of the month, again, from October through June, with December off. These are classes on topics like public works, the police department. If you want to know how cities are planned, if you want to know why the water pipes are laid out the way that they are, or what it is that the police are doing in terms of their equity and accountability work. You want to hear that directly from department leaders and from elected officials. Mayor Beatty has already agreed to come speak at the first session in October. Any member of council is welcome to come. What we've got actually slated is to have the council president, and my understanding is that that's an annual and rotating position, but if I'm mistaken about that, then certainly no offense intended, President Massey, but is to invite the council president, whomever that might be, next June to sort of wrap up with us as we discuss council goals. If you want to know about how this city works, this is a great opportunity. MilwaukeeOregon.gov/leadership academy. Dinner is provided, and this year, my pledge is that it will not just be a taco bar, delicious though that was all year last year for 6 sessions. It's a lot.
And on that, just kind of adding to what Dan just said, I really would encourage all of you, not all at once, but I would encourage you as individuals to come and at least be there at the start of the meeting, be there for the meal, engage in a conversation with people. Because it's amazing to me, many people don't know who the mayor is, so they certainly don't know who the councilors are unless they have a personal relationship with you. And to me, it's just part of, well, it adds some gravitas, is too serious a word for this, but it adds some importance to this. That's how people realize, oh, the city really cares about this.
Yeah, I've always found it really fun to go and just, I mean, a couple times I've spoken, but sometimes I've just gone for the meal, like you said, and to hang out for the beginning part.
Yes, first session October 9th.
First session is October 23rd.
23rd, okay.
Yes.
It's the fourth Wednesday?
It's usually going to be the last Wednesday, but it's, so October 23rd, November 20th. So on February 26th is my birthday, so if people who want to do police and engineering, probably get some cupcakes, spoiler alert there. That might be a fun one to attend.
And so I take it it's not full since you're asking for.
Just start.
Just started.
Oh, just started.
So we've got an ad out in the pilot. There's a banner on the homepage. We're going to be sending some stuff out through Peach Jar to the schools so that we get that information out that way. And then there will also be social media posts and through the normal channels of distributing information.
And so when you say you've never turned anybody away, it's never been even oversubscribed. Like you've never felt there were.
You got close.
We've gotten close. Generally, Mayor, what we'll do is we'll limit it to 25 folks, and we've gotten up to the 24, 25 range. I think one year we stretched it to 26, just knowing that there will be some attrition. But if some year we had 40 applicants, what we've always said is that, we'll try to accommodate everybody. And fundamentally, this does become an issue for City of Milwaukie residents, since that's our primary pool that we're drawing from. So, I mean, if we ever did need to cut somebody, it would be on the basis of residency, but it's never come up. And if it was a marginal situation where we had, 28 instead of 25, I think we'd probably bring in some extra chairs.
Yeah. And you do them in here.
Well, we do them in the community room. Just the one that you attended this last year was sort of a fluke because it was booked that night, but I am proud to say that I have reached out and booked all of the rooms well in advance. So there are also field trips. We go to the public works yard, we go to the library, we go to the public safety building. get a tour, hear what our police department really thinks about the fire department. They like them and respect them. That's the actual thing. But it's a good opportunity.
Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you all. We're about done, but I'll take the opportunity to thank Dan and make the point of his enthusiasm as part of what makes this work. And he's the third staff person to work with me on it.
You thought last miss. Not me though, not me. I'm with this.
All right.
And we want to thank you, Steph.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're welcome. I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it.
Facilitation dream team.
Thank you, Dan.
And creation, so. All right, and with that, we will go to youth engagement strategy, which is a good segue, as noted. Counselor Stebbins, so she has a. You're good.
I'm a co-pilot. Come on up. So I get to see what it's like in the hot seat. No, I don't have a clicker. So exciting. Which one clicks? Okay. All right. Testing. Ooh, okay, we're good. Well, hello, Council, Mayor, Council President. Thank you for opening up some time to talk about youth engagement. We've had pieces of this conversation, and I thought it might be helpful to sort of wrap things together and get all on the same page. And I am honored because a dear friend of mine is able to join. We go way back. We were youth development colleagues when Josh worked for Multnomah County and I worked for Clackamas County. And I was thinking about it today. We have been colleagues and friends for about 20 years.
Yeah.
Neither of us clearly look that old, but and Josh's birthday was yesterday. So congratulations on your 25th birthday. So let me first allow some time, and would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure.
I'm so excited that you're
Thanks
here.
for having me. Mayor, council members, my name is Josh Todd. I use he, him pronouns. I have spent the last 30 years of my professional career in youth development, 22 of that here in the Portland metro region. I was a staff assistant and policy advisor for the city and county of San Francisco in their youth commission. And then when I moved to Portland, was recruited by Multnomah County to help kind of reinvigorate their youth development function, which at the time was a youth advisory group for one very small department. It now is the official youth advisory body for Multnomah County and the city of Portland. And it was actually solidified through an intergovernmental agreement. So those two governments came together. I most recently was the president and CEO of a youth development nonprofit here in Oregon called Campfire Columbia. We run Camp Manu in Clackamas County here, and we serve Clackamas, Multnomah, and Yakima counties. But my kind of specialization, if I have one, I've always been a bit of a generalist, but has been in the intersection of local government and young people. So I'm just here to support your resident expert because we go way back in doing youth development programming, and these exact conversations that you are having today was the work that we were doing, which is how do you engage young people, get them to understand their government, how it works, and how they can create change within their own local communities, because we know the most effective place to create change is right here at this level, at city government, county government. And so helping young people really feel that agency. So I'm just here to add color commentary along the way.
Well, you can see why Josh is my phone a friend. So what we're discussing with you tonight is what I've affectionately called Milwaukie Spark, because it is just really starting with a spark that supports young people in being more actively engaged in the city. We have a mechanism to do that through our boards and committees, which is a very formal process. But if council is open to the idea of building something out that is a bit less formal and being able to build some programmatic strategies around that, I think that would be really exciting. It's also represented as a goal for the Equity Steering Committee to engage more young people. And so I think that there are a lot of pieces that align. So, let me give you a little refresher as to generations. Oh, you don't need to call out which generation you're associated with. But the Pew Research Center has done a lot of work around kind of quantifying what Generation Z is doing for the world right now. And I added a little piece in there because this was developed in 2019. And the generation that has been like ballooning since then really is Generation Alpha, which is where you'll find most of the young people who participate in our boards and committees at this point. So this is just kind of to frame the conversation, give you an idea of, this is not to start generation wars or fuel generation wars, but to give you an idea of the representation of different generations within the demographic of Milwaukie, which you'll see here. And again, this is Census 2020 data. So 4 years seems like 4 decades at this point. But I want to call your attention to the 3 areas that are down at the bottom. If you can see them, this is the translation of how old those young people would be now. And so this is a considerable population within Milwaukie. They're very, very active in the high school that's just right downtown. When school gets out, you'll see a lot of young people moving through the downtown area, going to the Letting Library. There's a lot of opportunity to engage youth in what the future of the city can look like. And as you're seeing, this bulge of ages where many of us might be located, moving further and further up. And so it's important and it behooves us as a city to be thinking about how the future of our development is informed by young people. So let's start with just a little reflection. I thought it would be helpful to kind of ground the conversation, get an idea of how you engage with youth in your current role on council or in the community. And not everyone has to share. We can popcorn. We can talk a lot. We can talk a little. But this might be really helpful, so it's not just so one way. Anyone want to jump out there? I know you engage with youth in the community.
That's like asking me how I engage with gay people. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I guess I engage with youth. I don't know. I think a lot about how we get more young people involved in politics a lot. Because I have this like dichotomy where I'll work with the young people trying to get them in politics, and then I work with older folks who say, God, we need more young people in politics. How do you bridge that gap? I'm really excited about the work that you're doing to get people on our boards and commissions. I don't know if that's helpful. I don't know.
Yeah, it is
I'm not
helpful.
responding well to the prompt.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's totally fine. It's just mainly to get you kind of thinking about it, and it's perfectly okay to say that we don't, I mean, I think that we used to honor the student of the month in our meetings, and that was a very surface level interaction with youth. We got to hear a little bit about their experience. We got to get to know them a little bit, ask a few questions, but really that's, a 10 or 15 minute agenda item. I think that most of us come into contact with youth in community events. And, when we think about the community survey, which I'll get to in a second, a lot of our community and a lot of young people in our community attend events. And so it might be helpful for us in this strategy to be thinking about how we build in youth development strategies in the events that we shows up at. Fancy
I've worked for the county for quite a while. I live there though.
And actually, Gabriella, do you want to join the conversation? I would love to have your voice here too, because you've been involved in a lot of different intersecting ways.
Is it okay if I sit
Yes,
here?
please do. Keep it warm. Did anyone else want to share?
Yeah, I'd like to add something is that, I've met a couple of the youth members of the boards and committees over the last month or so. And, I thank you for, last time them in somehow. But I would tell you, I think it's kind of intimidating for them to come to those kind of meetings. And so I learned a long time ago about, kind of how to work a room. And so I kind of try to work the room, especially with them, because I know that they're going to be, intimidated by that. And you don't have to do anything special. You just have to ask them what classes they're taking, what they're interested in, and just get them to open up so that they feel at home. It's something that, it's a basic sort of thing that we should all do. We should be doing it at the MDAs, quite frankly, when somebody new comes in. But, to just get them comfortable with what they do, with what we're doing and everything like that, and, and introduce them to other members and that kind of thing, because getting them in the door is great, but you gotta keep them.
Well, and when we were interviewing them this year, I really thought about that, we had 2 committees that got 2 youth each. And then we had, and I thought that was ideal because then they're not the only young person in the room. And so they have somebody to, decompress or whatever with. And we had 1 committee with only 1. So I will be curious to see after a year in terms of continued participation, was it more successful where we had 2, and we're going to appoint 1 tonight on one on a committee where that youth will be the only youth. So I do think that's going to be interesting to watch. But I do miss our student of the month. And I do want to give a shout out to Scott and Nicole, who really tried about 2 years ago, tried really hard to get youth members on our boards and committees, and we really didn't have a lot of uptake. But you managed to, well, I don't know, anyway. I think there's, it'll be interesting to see the lessons we learn with this first round.
I think that a lot of jurisdictions, they think that it's a good idea to involve young people, and it is. But I think that they struggle. And, there are ups and downs, and even the youth commissions that Josh and I staffed, there would be a mass exodus one year for some reason, and then we'd have to rebuild. And so it's not uncommon to have, and Scott was dealing with the pandemic and engaging young people during the pandemic when their entire life for school was on a computer is like, my hat is off to you, sir. I think that, we have to be engaging best practices. And Mayor, you were touching on one of them, which is making sure that there's at least 2 young people who are in a room, because it's so intimidating. And so you are, we had a really wonderful orientation. And again, thank you to Scott and Nicole for helping pull together the boards and committee chairs, the staff liaisons, and all of the youth that are on the boards and committees. And we just kind of got together and we had a debrief and we talked about what their hopes were, and they got a chance to connect more with the staff person and the chair of their committee, which I think goes a long way in retaining youth. But to have somebody to, whisper to, did you understand that? And they wouldn't have understood it either, and just to have that common experience is really important.
Yeah, there's a great resource actually for you all. It's a national nonprofit out of Boston called Youth on Board. And it's specifically about how to get young people engaged in boards and commissions. And one of those pieces is around making sure that they have an orientation. If you're familiar with the concept of universal design in kind of disability advocacy, in a lot of ways youth development is universal design for city government. Because when you look at what it takes to really engage a young person, it's no different than anybody else walking in who does not have a background in municipal government, right? We explain our terms. We slow down and unpack our acronyms. We introduce them. We say hello. We ask them what classes they're in, right? That helps everybody feel more connected. Walking in a room and seeing somebody else who looks like you. All of those are strategies that are grounded in youth development practice, but actually make city and county government more accessible to all residents.
And the more you do that, then the more retention you have. And that's across the board, but especially true for young people. So what I thought would be helpful on this piece is, and I'm trying to fast track so that we can have a little bit of a break and you can get some food before the regular session. But I thought what might be really helpful in highlighting the importance of youth voice is if Josh would tell us a story. What you see on the screen is a logo for the Bill of Rights for Children and Youth. And this was adopted by Multnomah County and the city of Portland, but it was
First in the nation.
first in the nation, designed by youth. And I was hoping that you might tell us a story. How
Yeah.
did it come to be and what was the path?
So when I joined Multnomah County, it was 2002. And like I said, it was a youth advisory board for one small agency. We transitioned them because their interest was how do we get more involved in policy? And so we transitioned to the Multnomah Youth Commission, which was still only Multnomah County at the time. But then the young people started saying, but how do we organize this? How do we do policy? How do you do policy? And so what they started asking for is, can we create some kind of framework that helps us understand and engages more than just our voices? The Youth Commission at the time was 12 years old to 21 years old, up to 24 students, I think. But they're like, we need more voices. And so they really asked the city and the county to come together and put resources towards a rather large community engagement project. And over the course of about a year, we engaged 5,000 young people. Ended in what we called a constitutional convention with about 500 young people at the Expo Center. And it was really crowdsourced. This was in 2004, 2005. Google Docs was like new, fresh technology. And we were co-editing live in a room together with 500 young people in breakout rooms, them talking about what are the issues that most matter to us. And a lot of them you wouldn't be surprised by: education, violence prevention, transportation. And they created a Bill of Rights that said every young person, regardless of immigration status, race, gender, age, like if they live in this community, they should have access to these things: safe communities, opportunities for employment, public transportation. And what they did was they took all of that feedback and they came up with our Bill of Rights, Children and Youth, and brought it, finalized it, and brought it to the city and the county and asked them to adopt it as official policy. And it was adopted by both Multnomah County and City of Portland, and it became, and still is, the kind of framework for the Youth Commission, how they do their work. And the one story I'll end with on this piece, because it's been one of the professional lessons that I took, is that, you know, after that was adopted, we had a retreat, winter retreat, with all the young people, and they started looking at the Bill of Rights and saying like, well, what are we going to do? How do we now make this real? And a group of young people were talking about the transportation, like, well, we should get free bus passes. And the adult part of me that knew TriMet and, you know, understood the complications with transportation was like, good luck, that's never gonna happen. Like, maybe cheaper, maybe we'll get a discount. But the youth development worker, and this is a good point of like, what's the difference between engaging with a young person doing youth development work, was that the inquiry itself was an intervention. Them being excited about transportation was, instead of saying, well, here's why it won't work, the question back to them was, well, what would you need to know to be able to do that? And they said, well, we would probably need to know how to fund it. It's like, okay. It would be good to know if anybody else has done it. It's like, okay. And they started breaking themselves, with adult support, but breaking themselves up into study committees and being like, okay, has anyone else done this? Has it happened anywhere else? How did they fund it? What did they do? And the immediate adult response of like, you don't understand, that's not gonna happen, from a youth development framework became, okay, what do you need to know? Now let me help you find that information. You're gonna do the work, because if you don't put the work in, that's a lesson, right? If you don't put the work in, the change doesn't happen. If you do the work and you find out it's not possible, that's a lesson. All of this is helping young people develop a sense of agency and a skill set. The amazing part, which I never would have expected, was the outcome, which was they did their research, they found other places that had done this, and lo and behold, one of the places that had done it was Benton County, Oregon. And they were like, how does Benton County have free bus passes? And there was a very wonky business energy tax credit, lovely known as the Betsy, that's goal was to reduce carbon emissions. And so Benton County had applied for free bus passes as a strategy to reduce carbon emissions because they had research that showed that some of the biggest times for carbon emissions were around getting kids to and from school. And so they're like, well, let's give them free bus passes and take those cars off the road. And so they researched it and they brought it to the mayor and they brought it to the county chair. And they said, we want you to go out, because we don't have the connections, and find business partners that need these energy tax credits and would be willing to help fund this project. And the mayor and the county chair brought in the executive from TriMet, and they hammered out a deal. And it was driven by young people. It was their idea. It was their research. It wasn't their connections. It took the adults to be able to make that happen. But because of them, it was their most successful organizing campaign. Within, I think, about 18 months, we had Portland Public Schools, the largest district in the state, offering free bus passes to all high school students. 14,000 students got access, and that now has expanded to other East County districts. And so it shows that possibility of, like, when we step back and say, okay, what do you want to see in your community? Let them dream and come up with some of the critical questions, not the, this is why it can't happen, but be open to, like, maybe it can. And allowing them to then do their work. I never would have thought that project would have actually happened. I would have shut it down if I didn't come from a framework of there's possibility.
Yeah.
And that still exists. My kids weren't even born when this was happening. My kids benefited from that. My kids, who are now grown and Charity's graduating with her master's in December, they got free bus passes because of that piece of work. And it all started with this framing of a group of young people and having a space where they weren't just the one or the two, but they had a space where it was all young people meeting together, specifically talking about how can we make our community better through city and county government. And they developed that, and they've since gone on to create youth forums on violence prevention and, you know, have done mini grant programs and are funding other young people to organize and create projects that improve the community. But all of that came from this framing of allowing young people to say, this is what a great community feels like to us, without the lens of adults saying, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you work on that? Why don't you help plan the decorations for Founders Day, or, you know, whatever. We've seen a lot of kind of tokenism that happens. But really stepping back and saying, what would a thriving community look like for you? Because that's the one piece that we learned, was that when young people are allowed to dream, you're creating not only understanding of, like, how does government work, but you're also solving some of your critical problems. When you all, I just heard the little bit of the conversation before I came in around, like, how do we diversify the folks volunteering for the city? You know, I just quickly did, maybe these statistics are off, but 46% of the students at Rowe Middle School are students of color. 44% of all the students in North Clackamas School District are students of color. Milwaukie High School is majority students of color. So if you want to diversify the city, we need to start looking at our younger generations, because our state is becoming more and more diverse. And that's where that happens, is by, you know, going to young people who are interested. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'll stop.
no, don't ever apologize. I could sit for hours. So, and you returned the favor so many times. Well, so a couple of things that come to mind for me. So jurisdictions that want to do effective, authentic youth engagement need to understand the training and the supports that have to be in place with adults as partners and allies in this work. And so, you know, I think that coming into that conversation, the piece that that was critical is that you had that background and you had that frame that stopped you from adulting in that moment. And I think that if we are moving forward on a path to do this and to really do it, then that means that the staff liaisons and the committee chairs that are engaging with youth, and eventually anyone in the city that wants to interface with youth in this type of a programmatic way, we should have a core programming, like a core training that they go through that, you know, focuses on authentic youth-adult partnership and on youth development. The other piece is about how diverse our community is. And, you know, it's not just those 3 or 4 bars at the youngest age of the census that are coming up, but there's so much more diversity and there's so much more, it's not just race and ethnicity and socioeconomic diversity, but it's also diversity in the way that they're finding information and the way that they're navigating the like plethora of information that's available to them in really exciting ways that I think also we kind of run the risk of adulting. Like don't be on TikTok for so many hours. But, my own teenager will be like, well, I learned how to do this and this and this. And then they show me like, it's amazing. So I wanted to include some of this. I'll also mention that I'll send these slides out to council, or Scott has them, so they'll become part of the record. But I've hyperlinked everything that's in the presentation. So if you want to go and look at, the Pew Research data, if you want to look at the Bill of Rights, children and youth, all of those things are linked within the presentation. So when I think about some of our council goals, I think about climate action, when I think about parks, when I think about equity, that screams get young people involved to me. This comes from Pew Research and Bloomberg in partnership with Johns Hopkins, but young people are engaging with more information about climate change because this is a priority for them. And this is a priority for us. We've made this a city goal, but these two worlds are not connecting in the way that they could maximize the partnership. So if we're interested in engaging youth around our goal of climate action or our goal of equity or our goal around parks, I think that we might find that we have some shared priorities, and they probably have a lot of ideas and opinions for us. So don't feel like you have to read all of this. But, as the Pew folks are doing research around Gen Z, this is the largest racial and ethnicity diversity that we're seeing raise up through the country, raise up through political action. Councillor Anderson, as you were talking about how to get more youth engaged in politics, I think that young people have always been thinking, how do I make change in my community? But how the vehicle that takes place in is very rapidly changing. And being able to access those systems of change are more readily available. And it's incumbent upon us as adults and leaders within our community to make sure that those are accessible to everybody in Milwaukee.
And the other piece to remember is that most historical movements for change have been led by young people. The climate action movement right now is being led by young people. The civil rights movement, most of those leaders, when we think about, Huey Newton and MLK, they were in their 20s. When we talk about Stonewall, which sparked the queer civil rights movement, those were homeless teens. Those were people that were 17, 16, 18. Young people have always been on the front lines of the fight for social justice. And so the thought that they don't know enough, or almost all change has always happened by young people leading the charge.
So I've added this just as something for you to think of. When we reflect on our Milwaukie community survey, we actually only survey people who are 18 and over. So we're leaving out an entire population that has opinions, that, if you have youth that are in your life, and when school gets out and they walk through downtown and they're grumbling about how many things are open or closed, or when Milwaukie closes for the night, what can be done, where can I go, I'm bored. That seems like a great opportunity to involve them in economic development conversations. When young people are saying, I want to go to the football game, but it's raining, I don't want to walk. That's a perfect opportunity to engage them in a conversation about transportation, about the completeness of our networks and our transportation systems plan. But when we are thinking about the foundation of data that we make decisions on, and we extrapolate the conclusions from our community and their priorities, we're not even surveying young people. This is These are graphs made for ants. These, I will just summarize these. So we look for where can you find youth priorities, right? And one source that is questionable in its completeness is the Healthy Youth Survey that's done at a statewide level. And I say questionable in terms of completeness because it's an opt-in, opt-out kind of situation. So at the school district level, you can opt out of doing these. At the school building level, the schools can opt out of completing these. At the individual level, students can opt out of doing these. And so it gives you a sample and it gives you kind of a hint of things that you might want to begin to talk to youth about. But I would be hesitant to say that this is exactly what young people are thinking about if you're looking at the findings of these. The three that I picked out to look at are how much trust do you have in your neighbors? And the larger section in that top left is no trust at all, a little trust, or some trust. On the right-hand side, it's how much trust do you have in government? And again, no trust at all, a little trust, some trust. And then I volunteer to help others in my community. Now this is the inverse. Very much true, pretty much true, a little true. So you have a general glimpse into the life of young people. They don't have a large connection to their community or to the government that serves them. And yet they still want to be involved in their community and they still find some connection in being involved. And again, I think that is a call to action for us to find out how we connect those pieces.
And actually, community engagement research has shown this time and time again. Do you all know the number one reason why people don't volunteer?
Nobody asked them.
Nobody asked them. The number one reason people don't volunteer is because they've never been asked.
Okay, so Emma, we might have to run a couple minutes over. Council, we might have to run just a couple minutes over.
Yeah.
So understanding youth engagement can take a number of forms. We're not going to go into all of them this evening. I wanted to pull out one example, which is something that is within our power, to create a youth council within the city of Milwaukie. Now, I'm not saying that after we leave this meeting, boom, it's going to happen, because honestly, that would be irresponsible. There's a lot of preparation work that has to be done. But if council is interested in moving that direction, I and others in the city have interest in supporting something like that to move forward. So other cities and towns have done this. We have lots of examples across the world, the nation, right here in our backyard. We have a lot of people who, all I had to do was just call. And Josh was like, I will be there. Should I wear a suit or should I wear tennis shoes? So I think, there are a lot of people who have struggled with these things and have really wonderful experience who are just a phone call away. I also think that it's okay for us to stumble. It's okay, but I think it's just having that intention and that commitment and that value around including young people in the decision-making that we take part in. That's the piece that I think is the key, the North Star. Oh, look at this, a little graphic. This actually, you could actually spend an hour or more. You could spend a whole day going into the depth of this. And I'll let Josh explain maybe a couple examples of where we've found each other over the years, but this is where you would look at this and say, young people are dropping out and maybe they're feeling tokenized. Then you look on here in terms of the control that adults have, or the control that youth have, or the shared control that you have in a situation. What you might find is as you're reaching shared control, you're increasing the empowerment that both young people and adults are feeling. And so then you have a more authentic engagement.
I think that's actually, one of the first mistakes that sometimes has happened when I've been engaged with folks trying to do youth engagement is that they think that just telling young people like, oh, we're so glad you're here, run with it. Y'all have whatever you want to do, we're going to support. That's actually not the most empowering thing to do. I've always said one of my strongest organizing principles has been never ask a question you already know the answer to. Which happens a lot. Like, what do you all want to do? Even though well, we have budget limitations and we have priorities and we have a strategic plan and a comprehensive plan. And so creating a container that says, what are you passionate about? Okay, within this box, Milwaukee City, here's what the parameters are. What would you do in that box? And then coming back, similar to what happened with Youth Pass, it would not have happened if adults weren't on the other side saying, we know TriMet. We know the state, we know business partners, right? It was having young people feel like, oh, there are adults who actually care instead of feeling isolated and kind of off on their own, spinning their wheels to get really excited about an idea and then come back and then have to be told, oh, well, actually, we don't have budget, or oh, actually, there's no staffing, or, and so finding those points where youth skills, understanding, fresh perspective is paired with adult training, adult connections, adult resources to serve the city is where you see that sweet spot.
And it takes a long time to get that sweet spot.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of trial and error.
And there's lots of good stuff that happens in all of that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, there are some young people who will love the tokenizing stuff. They're like the one youth that's on the board and everybody asks them, what do you think? And they turn to them, they love, some young people love that. And they can feel great. And for them it does. But do they represent all young people? Obviously no. And we're setting them up for failure if we make them feel like, oh, I can represent all young people. Because one of the lessons to learn is that we are all only the experts of our own experience. And where real strength and power comes from is bringing others to the table and coming up with a collective solution.
So one of the things that sometimes shows up but isn't articulated are the barriers to involvement. And these show up sometimes in really invisible ways. But what we notice is then that the middle schooler who's involved doesn't finish the program. Or we had a couple of high schoolers involved, but then they stopped coming to meetings. And so I think, part of that framework, that foundation of work is making sure that you have adults that are trained and know to look for some of these barriers so that if somebody doesn't come to, a meeting and they don't let you know, then maybe you call, maybe you text, maybe you check in and say, hey, I know you had, finals. Was everything just kind of feeling overwhelming? Or, is there anything that you want me to bring to the committee to share on your behalf? Things like that. So there's so much that happens outside of the meetings. And I don't think that in general we think about that if you're so used to attending meetings as a member of dominant culture and as an adult. So, we might say like, oh, well, so-and-so missed a meeting, but I'm sure they'll be at the next one. And with a young person, I don't think that you have the luxury to assume they'll be at the next one, because there might be a million things that happen in that month span that happen for a young person. A month is a very long time to go without contact.
And again, going back to the universal design, there's so much that are barriers to youth engagement that are also barriers to citizen engagement. So we would always at youth commission meetings make sure that there was food. We would always make sure that there was transportation supports. We would always allow young people to bring younger siblings because childcare was a barrier. But we also would always make sure that there was an opportunity for connection and fun, which sometimes when city or county staffers would come in, they're like, why are we spending resources to let kids play a game? I'm like, well, because part of the reason why they're in this room is for the socialization, for the fun, for, an opportunity to hang out with their peers, which is honestly, a lot of the reason people join boards and commissions is because they're just looking for connection. And so if we just jump right into business and we don't give people an opportunity to get to know each other, we miss one of those sticky points, one of the things that keeps people coming back. And so making sure that we do that, when you organize your youth meetings around that, it starts spilling over into well, why don't we do this at all of our meetings, right? Young people, when we were first doing meetings, they were like, why don't we have Play-Doh and things? Because they were like, I need to be fidgeting. I am not this is like school, if I have to sit here in a seat and listen to a presentation. And so we would have manipulables on the table and, squishy balls and things that they could be engaging the way they wanted. And some of that started spilling out into other adult spaces because people that came to our meetings were like, oh, that was actually really fun. I really enjoyed that. And so they would start doing it.
I'm not going to read these. They're in the presentation. We'll make it available. But the basic components of what authentic youth engagement around youth adult partnerships looks like and what positive youth development looks like, these are the two big ingredients. This is what comes together to make the magic happen. And it takes a lot of prep work on the part of adults that are involved, and it takes a lot of maintenance as a program is built out. So given time, I probably won't go into a lot of these either. In just to say that there are a lot of different ways that we can start engaging youth more actively. It could be that we add a component to the events that we're doing. It could be that even in the Leadership Academy, something that came up to me was a memory of that Josh had this board that was like, it was a game of like matching what the city does and what the county does. And it was
They still play that,
it's amazing.
They still play that.
It's so educational. And I feel like, our NDAs would appreciate that. The Leadership Academy would probably appreciate that. But for young
We'd
people,
appreciate it.
for young people, it broke down that like really oppressive stigma that when you come into the room, you're supposed to know these things. You should know all the acronyms and stuff like that. So if you have a good, youth engagement program, then you're talking about those things outside of the meetings.
And it gave them the strength too, because at the end of that activity, like, you could honestly, not blown smoke, look at a young person and be like, you now know more about how the city and county function than probably 99% of the people who live here, if they don't work for the city or the county. The other piece that we did, your point around getting young people involved in politics, that was always a barrier because a lot of times, at least back when I was actively doing youth development, which has been a while, the idea of politics wasn't actually very interesting. Like, they were just like, it's corrupt, it's this, it's that. And I was like, okay. And so we would do an activity that was like, you wake up, walk me through your day. And they'd be like, well, I go to school. I'm like, no. You wake up, what happened? My alarm went off. Okay. Is it on battery? No, it's plugged into the wall. Okay. Where does that power come from? PGE. Okay. That actually, we'd walk them through. I take a shower. Great. That's the city of Portland. That's the water bureau. It does this and this. I take the bus. That's TriMet. What form of government that is. And walking them through all the touch points of how government actually impacts your life. And then they would be like, oh, okay. Now I see why this is important. But it was helping them understand, because so much of it is invisible if we're doing our jobs right as kind of bureaucrats, and there's no problems, but helping people understand. These are all the touch points that you have, and you have the ability to oversee this. Like, you're interested in water, there's probably 5 citizen review members on one commission who make a bunch of decisions, and you could be one of them.
No, I just like the shower. So, when I think about the type of advocacy that comes out of that, it's not just then, so if you remember the graphic, it's not just adults advocating for changes that would be good for youth. It's young people understanding the power and the control and the autonomy that comes with the independence, that comes with being able to navigate the systems that intersect with your life. And then the advocacy becomes youth-led, and they become, advocates for other young people in their lives. And then you have a youth commission that has thrived for 20 plus years, and sometimes has to turn away applicants.
Yeah. Oh, so many. When we were running it, we were getting 100 applications for 24 spots. It was intense. But that was also just to say, I think looking back at the Leadership Academy, so much of that was because young people were doing the direct outreach. They were going to their schools, they were talking with their friends, and they were doing it even way back then with an equity lens. They were looking at what schools are represented, who doesn't serve on the commission, what about ages? How do we make sure that we don't have 10 seniors that are all going to leave next year, right? So they were in that process of like, how do you make a representative policy body, because policy impacts all of us, but who's not at this table? and the policy is still going to impact them, but they don't have a voice.
Which leads us to, if you feel connected to your community, you're likely to invest in that community and become a part of its future. So where Spark comes in, sorry, it's just acronyms, salad. But where Spark comes in is that we have an active role in supporting youth, highlighting and encouraging their engagement, their participation, advocating for policy change with them, reflecting their leadership in our structures, hopefully, eventually, and understanding the shared knowledge and the shared power that comes from being a part of these systems together.
And the youth that we worked with back in like the early 2000s, we've had young people that were part of Youth Commission go on to run for city council. We have a youth commissioner now who is the assistant director of the health department for Multnomah County. We have young people that are executive directors of nonprofits. Like, it opens them up to a world about, nobody like is in sophomore, civics class being like, I want to grow up to be a bureaucrat. But you get them excited about the power of public health, and they see a career that they never even knew was open to them.
And they stay in touch. And it's really cool to see that they're raising kids now who are benefiting from these lessons. So this is a proposal to think about. We're in the work session. We can decide if you choose to move this on to the next level of conversation. You can chew on it for a while. I'll meet with you individually if you like. But basically, to increase youth participation in our boards and committees, to increase the awareness of both youth development and positive adult partnership and what that means within Milwaukie, to increase opportunities for the diversity of our community to be reflected in youth who are participating and the voice that they have in our governance. To provide education about local government and policy development, which we kind of inherently do through our committees, but it takes just a little extra elbow grease and a little extra follow through to do it authentically with young people, to develop their skills, their leadership, and to look for other opportunities for their active participation. We have a core group of 6 right now who are involved in our boards and committees. There's a little like informal, ragtag kind of bunch wrapping around them to make sure that they have what they need for these meetings. And I think that we might be able to build on that. So this is something I just want to leave you with. You can reflect on the biggest issues facing our city today, and how young people might be a part of finding the solution to those issues. How their experience can inform the decisions that we're making about downtown, about how our transportation system is developed, how our climate action goals are being met. And I think that we owe it to the city, we owe it to all of the young people growing up in our city to do it in an authentic way. So I want to leave you with that, and some of the things that were already completed last year, and that's another reason for it being just a spark, is we got, and this, I did not do this by myself. I want to say thank you to Scott and Nicole and Gabriella and Emma and everyone else who has been helpful in supporting the young people to go through the application process and to be successful on their boards and committees. But there are 6, and they're excited and they're sharp. They're asking questions that we're gonna have to have answers for. We established kind of an informal cohort. They've met now twice. They're starting to form connection with each other, and it's really exciting to see. And then they worked with me over the summer. I dedicated some of my council budget to a collection on civic engagement at the Letting Library. And so they helped kind of talk through the type of books that they would like to see, offered some suggestions, and then we partnered with the librarians at the library to make sure that, those were all books that they had approved as well. So this fiscal year, we've had the youth orientation event. And again, thank you to Scott and Nicole and Gabriella. I think that we have informally agreed that we want to do quarterly check-ins with the youth cohort at least, that, give them a chance to sort of debrief what they've been participating in. I think that it makes sense for the adults that are already working with youth and their boards and committees to offer some training on youth development and best practices. And I think with that comes a component of risk management for the young people and for the city. So I'm willing to contribute some of my budget again this year if you're interested in building that out in consultation with some folks who have done it before. And then, we've basically been doing in-kind staffing and collaboration around this, but the more that this starts to build, the more it becomes a conversation to bring to council to determine how we would be interested in codifying this. So thank you for the extra time. And I know we went over, but it's a lot of information to consider, and really appreciate the conversation.
I was gonna say, there were several slides back. You had lots of good questions, and I do think we need to have another agenda, another day on the calendar to talk about. We have almost no dinner time left, so we should probably.
We'll look at the forecast and get some more time.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you. Presentation.
Good job.
Oh, no.
Thanks for coming, Justin.
Yeah,
Robert,
absolutely. Nice to meet you, Robert. Fun.
There is pizza here in the kitchen. You're gonna buy it different. Thank you so much. Next meeting starts at 6:00.
Oh,